So, I got to tell you a fun story. This week was the last week. I had Marley May in the afternoon. Cassie had some things to do. Abby had to work, and so I came home and was spending the afternoon with Marley May. I was laying there on the couch. I told Mom, I said, come over here and cuddle with me. Trying to get her to take a nap. She's like, no, Dad, I don't want to cuddle. She's like, but I'll go get you my Cooper. She runs in the room, grabs her baby doll, and lays it next to me. And she's like, hang on, I'll get you my other Cooper. Comes back. Hang on, Dad, let me get you my other Cooper. Comes back, lays him down. Pretty soon, she's like, Dad, you need my stuffed animal. Runs and grabs her stuff. Before long, I'm like piled up with all this stuff just laying on me. It's pretty fun. But that has nothing to do with my sermon today. So I saw Crystal sit down with Cooper, and she was wide-eyed, looking around. I was like, made me think of that, sorry. I thought it was pretty cute. I had 3 Coopers on the couch with me the other day. So all her babies are Coopers now. So we're going to continue with the Lord's Prayer today. And we're going to, again, divide one of the verses in 2, because I think at this point in his prayer, Jesus makes 2 separate points of attention for us. And this next verse, it can go together, but there's a lot of questions arise in my ministry with this particular verse from the Lord's Prayer. It's chapter 6 of Matthew, verse 13. It'll be on the screen here in just a minute. We're just going to look at the first half of it. But I want to ask you a question before we start. What tempts you? Many people reply with money, immorality, chocolate ice cream to be exact. But, temptation, I think in a lot of ways, is more serious than this. Certainly those things, if not done in moderation, can ruin your life. And sometimes you know it while you do it. There was a governor of New York several years back who ended up in a pretty big scandal. I can't think of his name. But anyway, Governor Spencer, and ended up in a pretty big scandal. And he has a quote that they asked him, one of the news anchors asked him, why did you allow your life to get to this point, basically? And the quote is this. It says, the human mind permits people to do things that they rationally know are wrong, outrageous. We succumb to temptations that we know are wrong and foolish, and we do it, and then in hindsight we say, how could I have? The most important part of all of this is that temptation is what leads you away from God. We choose things that replace God or ultimately defy God in a lot of ways. And so we come to this verse in 13. Lead us not into temptation. And the next part of 13 is, but deliver us from evil. We'll get to that next week. Lead us not into temptation. This is probably one of the biggest questions I have faced in my time as a pastor. And probably one of the most perplexing questions I've faced. This is the only negative part of the Lord's Prayer. We are asking God not to do something. But the question arises, why are we asking God to not do something that He isn't supposed to do to begin with? Tertullian said, far be the thought that the Lord should seem to tempt, as if He were either ignorant of the limits of someone's faith, or else eager to overthrow that faith. Right? This is the scripture we talk about a lot in life. God doesn't tempt us. But what's the point of this? I want you to think about that for just a second. I'm going to give you an answer today. This isn't one of those things that I go, I don't have an answer, sorry. I'm going to give you a little bit of an answer here. My answer for it. And it's all in the vocabulary. that is used here. Matthew uses the Greek word perismos. Okay? That's the word he uses here for temptation. This word sometimes means enticement to sin, which is what we normally associate with temptation. Other times, it means test or trial in Scripture. A trial can be a positive thing. It affirms your faith, as long as you pass the test. Trials are only negative when you fail them. And what most scholars, and I agree with, is that Jesus is saying here is we are asking God to not let us fail the test, to not succumb to the sin. Go back to the study we did on James. On verses 13 and 14 of chapter 1 of James, the same perismos word is used there. And James says this never comes from God. He doesn't tempt. The exact phrase is, when tempted, no one should say, God has tempted me, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when by his own evil desire he is dragged away and enticed. But the same Greek word, perismos, is used in verses 2 and 3 and verse 12 also, where it says, consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. And you skip to verse 12 and it says, blessed is the man who perseveres under trial, because when he has stood the test, he'll receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. So here the word perismos means a trial that makes us stronger when we overcome. The emphasis is not on avoiding it, but persevering through it. God permits us to be tested. That is a fact. There's a whole book in the Bible called Job, where it is God permitting Job to be tested. It is a conversation between God and the devil for part of it. It's a conversation between Job and his friends who are like, just abandoned already. And Job does not. He bends, and he bends an awful lot in some of it. But Job never breaks. I mean, you can't tell me that when your body was covered with boils to the point that you couldn't lay down or sit down, you wouldn't bend a little bit. I'm going to be completely honest, I would probably break. You put me through something like that, I'd probably break. I hope I wouldn't. I hope I have the faith. I hope I can persevere. God permits us and allows us to be tested. Trial, though, he doesn't tempt. That trial becomes a temptation only when we respond wrongly. Evidently, temptation, whether it's a testing or enticement, can be used by God, redemptively by God, for his glory and for our good. So how does God use that temptation? Well, you've heard me say it before. If you want to find out who someone truly is, you want to get to the core of their character, find them in the midst of a tragedy. Where are they going? What are they leaning on? Who are they running to? These temptations, these trials that become temptations. It's a test of what's in our hearts. It's a test of our character. I mean, look at the story. We want to talk about Job. Look at the story of Abraham and Isaac. Abraham was tempted to sin. Abraham was tempted to turn from God at this moment. You want me to do what to my son? I'm telling you right now, God looked down upon me, made it completely evident. He looked at me and said, hey, I need you to take Isaiah. I'll pack in a suitcase and we're running. All right? Because that's not the God I've come to know and love. I'm not saying it's not who he is. I'm not saying anything about his character. It's just not my imagination. It's not my way of thinking. But he looks at Abraham and says, hey, I need you to take Isaac. I need you to go to the top of the mountain. I need you to lay him on the altar. I need you to give him up for me. You want to talk about a test of somebody's character. And Abraham climbs that mountain, lays him out there, puts knife in air, and God says, hold up. Let me redeem you. We can walk as far as the edge of that temptation. But if we don't turn it to a sin, and we refuse it, God is normally standing there at the edge with us going, hold up, let me redeem you. It's not anything new. It's been going on for years. I stood before you 10 minutes ago, asking for prayer. Why? So that I don't go off that edge. That I don't give up. Because I'm human. And I know what the redemptive qualities of God are in my life. I've watched them in my own. I've watched them in several people as I've gone through ministry and as I've gone through life. I have watched God redeem people over and over because they refuse to let a trial become a sin. Because they refuse to let the fire burn them out. They decided, I've got something better to live for. I've got a life to change. I've got a route to travel. I'm not doing it anymore. And God says, let me redeem you. Because you won't give in. Your heart has been tested, and I have found it to be pure. That temptation not only reveals what's in our heart, it clarifies the significant issues in our life. The temptation of Jesus in the wilderness. Go back to it for just a minute here in your head. Okay, if you don't know the story, Jesus heads off into the wilderness, knowing full well, I think, what's coming. And he's still going, let's do this. Okay? I think many of us have been in that spot in our life with temptation too, knowing full well what's going. We're like, all right, I got this. And sometimes we don't. And sometimes we do. Right? But here goes Jesus off in the wilderness, and Satan sets it out for him. Him and Satan together. You can have this. You can get this. You can have everything. You just got to call it. Just save yourself. All of this can be yours. And every time he responds with what is significant in his life. And that is the scripture of his Bible. The word of his God. Martin Luther said, my temptations have been my masters in divinity. Reveals our heart, clears up the significant issues in our life, and it fortifies our will. Our commitment to God, our commitment to the gospel, our commitment to our faith is strengthened each time we overcome. Norman Vincent Peale once said, I would go so far as to say that the more problems you have, the more alive you are. Whoever has, let us say, 10 good, old, tough problems is twice as alive as the poor, miserable, apathetic character who has only 5 problems. If you have no problems at all, I warn you, you are in great jeopardy. You're on the way out and you don't even know it. what you had better do is say to the Lord, look, what's the matter? Don't you trust me anymore? Give me some problem to tackle. You want a problem to tackle? Pray for patience. God will give you a problem to tackle real quick normally. But it's true. If there's not an issue you're trying to overcome, if there's not some significant desire in your life that you're overcoming, if you're not fighting a fight daily in your life, you need to look to God and go, what's up? I want to develop. I want to become stronger. I want to strengthen who I am. But understand that's probably also the scariest thing you're ever going to ask God. Give me something to overcome. Let me become stronger. Let me become more fortified in who I am. Give me something to develop who I am. To become stronger alongside you with grace, mercy, and love. We can begin to provide that example for others. We can be a witness of God's grace to those on the outside. Job's stubborn faith was a witness unto Satan alone. When we maintain faith despite suffering, we present unbelievers with something to think about. We become an encouragement to other Christians. I want to be completely honest with you. I could sit up here and preach 1,000 sermons. But the actions of one overcomer witnessed with your own eyes will be more powerful. To watch somebody overcome by the strength of God is an amazing thing. When you get to witness, when you get to watch it happen, when you get to be the front runner sometimes, and when you overcome, and when you find the other side, and you succeed, and you look back. What a journey. What a development of faith. So we have to learn to respect temptation in our lives. Humans are more depraved than we ever realize. Jeremiah says, the heart is desperately wicked. Who can fathom it? Paul said, all who have sinned fall short of God's glory. Everyone has areas of weakness that can be exploited. I don't care whether you're 12 or 90. Everybody has areas of weakness that can be exploited. Jesus Christ himself had an area of weakness that could have been exploited. And he stood before Satan and said, no, absolutely not. 1 Corinthians 10 says, no temptation has seized you except what is common to man, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, but when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can stand up underneath it. God has set a limit on the intensity of every temptation. And alongside every temptation, God has designed a way out. You want to know why when you look to your future and you look at the back, you look to your past, you look behind you or in front of you, and you see lots of forks and curves and turns in the roads ahead or behind you? It's because God was giving ways out. He always has, And He always will. I have 2 young people that have called my home, my family, their family in my life, because God provided them a way out. The first time I ever welcomed them into my home for a lunch, a dinner, to play a game with me, whatever it may have been, do you think I looked at them and said, hey, I'm their way out? No, absolutely not. I'll be completely honest, the first couple times they were probably in my house was probably to entertain me because I was bored. Hey, come do something, I'm bored. I know you're out of school for the summer, come hang out. Maybe I can be an inspiration to you, you can be an inspiration to me, whatever. And every time, God's given them a way out. Maybe you're somebody's way out. Maybe you need a way out. But understand this. No matter where you find yourself in life, you have to respect that temptation. You have to give credit where credit is due. Because if you don't, that's when we fall victim. When we don't understand the power or the control it has on our life, that's when we fall victim. I mean, I know many of you have heard the saying, the will of God will never lead you where the grace of God cannot keep you. And although that doesn't come from the Bible, it's true. So why this petition with God then? Lead us not into temptation. We'll go back to the beginning of it. Go back to the prayer as a whole. It's a relationship of God and ourselves. We seek daily bread for our physical needs. We ask for forgiveness because we know we are sinful. We say, lead us not into temptation because we know we are weak. We know we need God's help to survive. We tend to make a lot of prayers focused on the we, the me, the I. If you look at the Lord's Prayer, the focus is on God. The most subtle temptation we fight our whole lives is to put ourselves in God's position. Our flesh is weak, but our God is strong. Stronger than any of us could ever imagine to be. Stronger than any of us could ever want to be when we really break it down. Maybe you find yourself in the middle of that temptation, that trial, that fire, and you need a way out. One of my least favorite sayings is the saying people say, God won't tempt you beyond what you can handle. And then they leave it at that. I know I just read a scripture to you that said something very, very similar. There's a but at the end of that. Won't lead you to more than you can bear. But He does provide a way out. You alone, by yourself, will be, can be, tempted beyond what you can handle. But God will provide you a way out if you will let Him. When we try to tackle trials in this life by ourselves, there are many tests that we will fail. But when we tackle trials by fire in this life with God as the front runner, always gives a way out. I can't tell you how many times in my life I've had to pray prayers, or on Thursday evening, laid my head on my wife's stomach as she stood next to me and listened to her pray for me. But all I hear is, "You've got this." You've got this. I've got you. Let's go. Life is a test, a rejoicement, a redemption, normally followed by another test, a rejoicing, and a redemption, followed by and God all the time was standing there going, "Look what I am creating. Look what they can do." And yes, there's plenty of times she goes, "No, no, 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 this is not what we're doing, this is not what we're doing." But it's a lifelong fight and battle to build our character and to persevere through life. Ladies and gentlemen, you want a complete sign of how true this is. I opened this sermon up on my computer this morning. I finished this sermon on June 28th of 2019. I opened it for the first time this morning to reread it, knowing this is where we're going today. I just spent 30 minutes preaching myself. I hope you got something out of it. But God's at work. He always is. And the fire that we'll walk through in life, the trials we'll go through, are the building and testing of the human and the child of God that He wants us to become. And He simply stands and asks each and every day of your life, will you walk with me and only me through this fire? Pray with me. Father God, we thank you. We thank you for the life that you have given each and every one of us. We thank you that we have the opportunity to live it with you. God, we just ask now that you guide and protect each of us. And Father, no matter what temptation, what trial we find ourselves in, that we lean on you. We use you to walk through the fire, to be our strength, to be our stronghold. It's in Jesus' name. Amen.